So Dilma Rousseff has made her final defense in front of the Senate on Monday, and the result of the impeachment is expected to come out on Tuesday, 11 p.m. local time, which is about 12 hours from now. So let me start with a question. What are her chances? Mr. Jiang with me in the Beijing studio first.
Well, I would say that her chances is quite slim. But let me tell you that just several minutes ago, many of my Chinese colleagues here in China say that, well, this kind of impeachment is a victory of democracy. But I would argue that this kind of political game is really a dangerous thing to the political stability in Brazil. So I would say that stability in Brazil is very, very important.
Victory for democracy. Charles, would you agree with that? What do you think are the chances of Dilma Rousseff staying?
I believe that her chances of remaining as president are almost nil. She was able to convince 2 senators to vote on her behalf, but you know, they already have 53 senators who declared against her, and there's 8 that have not decided yet. And I believe that they only need one, the opposition or the actual government only needs 1 senator's vote to have her impeached for good. And I do agree that in most countries, if you try to remove a president, you're going to have a civil war. You're going to have shooting. In Brazil, it shows the strength of the country being ruled by the rule of law, governed by the rule of law, and it's you know, under the presidency of the president of the Supreme Court, and the impeachment proceedings are being held without having anybody firing shots or killing each other.
So Ms. Magowan, let me bring you into the discussion now. How do you judge Dilma Rousseff's performance and her chances now?
Well, I agree with my colleagues. Her chances are very slim of staying in power. But I think the full impact, the full reaction of the people is yet to be seen. We have to see what happens once she's indicted, once she stops being the president, because as they say, they only need 1 more vote. There is one side that they say this is a political elite, and the other side say they represent the people, the country. Once this happens, we are going to see which side is right. Because if we have a lot of protests, if we have violence, if we have too many people going out on the streets to protest, then we will see that maybe this Congress does not represent as much as they think. Maybe it is an elite. Or if we see the opposite, that there's calm, maybe a few protesters and nothing else happens, then we will say that in this case it was a democratic movement, otherwise it wasn't. So I really think we have to wait until this happens to see actually, you know, what, if this is an elite or not, if this is a coup d'etat or not.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, her impeachment requires 54 of the 81 senators, a 2/3 vote, and some senators already predicted around 60 will vote yes to oust her. So it's expected by many that she will be removed from the office by the week. However, she herself said in front of the Senate that the initiative on her resignation was a plotted coup against her. She said the country's elite manufactured charges against her. What do you think of this, Mr. Jiang?
Well, I just don't want to use this word, political coup. This word is very too strong. I would prefer to say it's a political crisis. But for Brazil, it's really a sad reality. If we cannot deal with this kind of political crisis as soon as possible, the country will be sunk into a crisis deeper and deeper. And the possibility is that there will be political crisis and economic crisis. That will push this great country in South America into deeper and deeper crisis. That will be a great sad reality.
And Charles, what do Brazilian people think? I mean, Dilma Rousseff, she's got opponents, but she's also got supporters. How do people look at things now?
Well, I think that, you know, since she was removed from office, the economy has already started to react. And I think that after her definite impeachment today, we will see the stock market growing, and we will see the economy starting to grow again. Brazil's an enormously wealthy country, and once we have the political crisis put aside, then the economy will be free to grow again, and the political crisis will no longer affect the economy. However, as my colleague said, once the crisis or once the impeachment is defined, we may still have a lot of turbulence, because the people who favor her will not just lay down and take it quietly. And the people who are governing now, the President Dilma will become the definite president, and he will travel to China to participate in the G20 in Hangzhou. In fact, I'm leaving tonight to go to China as well for the events that will happen, the business and commercial events that will happen for this occasion. So I think that Brazil is on the way to recovering its economy.
All right, before I get to Ms. Magowan, let me read our viewers this. If Rousseff is voted out, she would end her term 2 years early. And before talking about a Brazil without her in office, let's now learn more about her. Now, Rousseff is an economist and the 36th president of Brazil. She's the first woman leader of the country. She first assumed office in 2011 and then got re-elected in October of 2014. She's suspended in May of this year following allegations of misconduct. And over the past few years, Brazil's GDP growth sharply declined from 3.9% in 2011 to a negative 3.8% in 2015, a recession called by some as the worst in a century. And as an economist, she blamed the slowdown in trade with China, monetary tightening in the U.S., and a severe drought in Brazil for the country's woes. Ms. Magowan, do you agree with that?
Well, partially, because yes, they have a very close relationship, commercial relationship with China, and China economy started decelerating itself, and so they buy less from Brazil, and that had an impact. But I will not blame everything in that aspect. There are many aspects. I think one of the main problems that Brazil has is that they don't make it easier to invest, especially foreign investment. I think they have, the bureaucracy is very big. The requirements to start a business are incredible. And I think they have to work on that, and that will depend on the next president. And it's very important also when they get engaged on trade, whether it's with China or other countries, they generally export primary goods when they should concentrate more in exporting secondary goods and more manufactured goods, more technical based services and stuff like that. And I don't see that happening at the speed I was expecting for a country that it's so large. They have a lot of natural resources, but they also have a lot of smart people, educated people, and I think they should use them better.
Can I just add
yeah,
one
sure.
point? Well,
go ahead, Professor.
I would say that it's wrong to blame everything on China. As a matter of fact, China has made great contributions to the Brazilian economy in the past several years. It is true that the prices of the commodity on the world market has been declining, but that decline is caused by the many factors. You cannot blame this on China. And my friend Charles Tang will agree with me that the economy is caused, the economic crisis is caused mainly by the so-called Brazilian cost. You know, by saying Brazilian cost, we are talking about the kind of a terrible infrastructure, high interest rate, high cost of getting loans, all kinds of things. Can you believe that shifting a bottle of wine from the winery in Brazil to the port in Brazil is higher than the cost from transporting this same bottle of wine from Brazil to China? So that's the basic reason for the Brazilian economic crisis.
So Charles, do you agree with what's been said? What has led to the economic crisis of Brazil? I mean, its economy is hurting because of the drop in commodity prices. The unemployment rate is high, inflation is skyrocketing. And the factor of China into this, what do you think?
Well, China has always been very helpful to the world economies. You take a look at Africa, where China, Africa was a lost continent before China started investing massively because the former colonial masters stripped Africa of its wealth. And China changed Africa from a lost continent to a continent of hope with its massive investments in infrastructure and so on. It's true that the Brazil cost, like my colleague said, is very damaging to Brazil. And the government of President Temer has already addressed this situation. The vision that he is, presenting to the Brazilian people is that we have to reduce the cost to fit the budget. We have to, reduce the taxes, make the labor laws more flexible, because they haven't changed one comma since 1943, and they're very, very costly. So I believe that once President Dilma is settled, the impeachment is settled, I think that the new government will take some very positive, non-ideological, political and economic measures that will help improve the economy. I believe that will happen, and I think that you cannot blame the world economy on everything. Sure, the lower cost of commodities and petroleum has affected Brazil, as it has affected many other countries that did not go into such an economic crisis. So I think there were mistakes made. There should be restructuring, as the new government is planning to do, and I believe that Brazil will recover itself, not immediately, but fairly quickly. And a lot, the Chinese companies are investing massively into Brazil, which is helping the Brazilian economy a lot.
Now, Charles, I got to ask you this, because if Dilma Rousseff is impeached, the now interim president, Michel Temer, will take over. And like we mentioned before it came on air, he will probably represent Brazil, and he will be the new face, represent Brazil, come to China, to the world leaders, to the G20 summit. Do you stand by his policies? What do you think of his policies, the social economic policies?
I think that his, economic policies, I think he's on the right track. As you know, his Minister of Finance, Enrique Meirelles, succeeded me at the Bank of Boston and became the president of the Bank of Boston before becoming the Minister of Finance. And I think he's very, very capable. I think that he has the right ideas. I think that the whole philosophy of the new government of privatizing everything, all the assets, because the state is not a good manager, reducing costs, making the labor laws less onerous and more flexible. And as far as the social area is concerned, President Temer has insisted to show the people of Brazil and to the whole world that he is continuing with all the social benefits and policies of the Labour Party, which did in fact improve the life of many of the miserable and the poor people of Brazil. And I think this government, the new government, will continue to do this.
All right, I see Ms. Magowan shaking her head. With all this said, Mr. Temer's polling is not high, he's not more popular than Dilma Rousseff. Given the polling, he's equally despised, if not more, as she was. Why is that, Ms. Magowan?
Well, the problem is he belongs to the same party. He was her vice president. Let's not forget about that. We are talking about the same political party. But what I was thinking when I was shaking my head is that you cannot implement capitalist measures, which is what my colleagues were, suggesting, and at the same time have a huge socialist machinery and trying also to feed that. It's either or. Sometimes you have to make choices. They have systemic problems, they have cultural problems, they have a huge problem with income inequality. They have to address that. It's not just that continue feeding the poor instead of training the poor, instead of educating the poor. It's not giving them everything for free, because when you do that, you keep them poor forever. And that is not something that will work. Brazil has had many waves, let's say, many changes in economy. I heard about the Brazilian miracle, I don't know how many times. They recover and then they fall again, and they fall even worse than when they were before. Why? Because they didn't address the structural, the systemic, and the cultural problems that they have. As long as they do that, they are not going to recover on a long-term basis.
Mr. Jiang, will Brazil recover after this political crisis? With G20 summit coming in just around the corner, Brazil reportedly aims to woo China investment during the upcoming summit. How do you look at things now?
Well, my answer would be yes and no. Yes, that means that if the political crisis can be resolved as soon as possible, that will be a kind of political condition. That will be better political condition for its economy. But on the other hand, we must understand the U.S. Fed is likely to increase its interest rate, and that's not good for its economy. And also the prices of the commodities on the world market are still quite low. So there are both positive and negative factors for the future of the Brazilian economy. However, having said that, I would say that China and other countries might make more investments in this great South American country. The investment opportunities are so huge. So if suppose that China can offer a certain kind of help for Brazil, then that would be nice.